Good morning. What an extraordinarily powerful reading this is. Here we have this story that we would think couldn't be possible, that somebody who was so close to an avatar, to Jesus himself, one of 12 that Jesus chose to be near him, could actually betray him in such a remarkable way, literally turn him in and be the cause of the death of Jesus. And of course, it's all the more dramatic because of how Jesus died. I mean, you imagine Judas being the reason that Jesus was crucified. It's almost impossible to hear it as a true story, and yet it was. And in the Bhagavad Gita reading today, which I'd like to read again a little later, Krishna so beautifully lays out exactly how these things can happen. And it's pretty remarkable. And Swamiji says, beware fear delusion, he says. Not in the sense of cowering, but in the sense of opening your eyes, acknowledging how this could be in you. Because I think when we look at this story, we have to say we all have a little Judas in us. We just do. And it's so easy to imagine how it just starts, as the Gita says, ponder on any sense pleasure. Just think of it. It just came to me this morning. All of the ways that can happen. You're on a diet, you're not wanting to eat any sugar, but you manage to tell yourself, one cookie. You're trying to study, you really want to be focused, but you say, one more YouTube. I can watch one more. We've all done this. We don't want to enter into a relationship, but we say, what's a kiss? And then think of an example in your own life. Before you know it, you're into the relationship, you're back on sugar, it's 2 hours later, you're still surfing the net or watching Instagram one after another. I mean, I have very dear friends who are devoted on this path who tell me they're just mesmerized by Instagram now. It gets you. And this is really what happened to Judas. He had an attachment to money or to power, I mean, whatever it is. And he actually was able to start convincing himself that he knew something that Jesus Christ didn't know. It's remarkable. Last week, I was preparing. I gave Sunday service for Portland online, and there were many ways to pick the topic up last week about inner communion, but Adam and Eve was certainly a part of it. So I read the story of Adam and Eve in a way that I hadn't read it before, and I came across Master Yogananda telling Sri Yukteswar that he did not understand the story of Adam and Eve. There were a lot of things about it, he told his guru, that confused him. So then Sri Yukteswar says, you can't look at this story literally. Well, of course. I mean, how could an apple cause so much trouble? Now, we won't look at it literally, but how will we look at it? And Sri Yukteswar explained to Yogananda that when God realized that there were animals whose souls were ready for a higher state, that he manifested the human being from his own consciousness. Energetically, he manifested it. But he took, I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, I have it here in case I was going to read it, but you'll hear my words, not Sri Yukteswar's, because it really helps us understand how strong these urges are, how powerful the delusions are, what happens to us that we can't resist it, even Judas with Jesus. But he said he took the souls of the animals and put them in these human beings. And then he said to the human beings, probably not in words, but energetically, saying to them, you can satisfy any of these senses. You can look at beauty, you can listen, you can smell, you can touch. But the one thing you can't do is eat the apple. And the apple represents the sexual drive. But Sri Yukteswar said, when life force was entering those beings, it awakened the memory of the sexual drive, of that incredibly instinctive, unthought out, because they had the souls that were just animals in the last life. And so when the life force entered means created, manifested the astral spine with all of our chakras, it reawakened that desire for sex, which became, they just couldn't avoid it. It was irresistible in them because the animal was still in them. And Yogananda was saying to Sri Yukteswar, why did every generation of man after that need to suffer? Because of those two. But the truth is, the way it all evolved, we all have that animal instinct in us. And that is very powerful. You know, I mentioned Max, my puppy, a lot here now. I've decided Max is a mascot for Ananda Palo Alto. Forgive me, those of you who have dogs who love them. I'm going to bring Max one day because Max is irresistibly cute. Anybody who's seen him knows. It's true. People wrote to me. Remember, I sent something out asking for prayers. I must have gotten 30 emails back with people saying, this is the cutest animal on earth. And he is. And he's very smart. Well, I need to train him because he's adorable, but it's not so adorable that he's jumped up and ruined about 5 of my sweaters now, or that he wants to be in my lap eating my dinner, not his, and on, barking, everything. So I've started training him. I'm working with the trainer who trains me, and then I train the dog. And I watch him, and it's really touched me. It's very much like this reading. Max wants to please me, probably more than anything in the world. I watch him. He's looking at me, and his little body's just shaking. But I'm holding this piece of duck jerky over here. Duck jerky right now is his favorite food in the world. And I'm saying to him, Max, look at me. Look at me. Now he knows if he doesn't just look right at me for 15 seconds, we're up to 15, he's not going to get the jerky. And I watch, and it's one thing after another, everything I'm training him. It is so hard. I'm trying to train him away from his instincts because what he wants to do is bark at the people who come to the door. That's what dogs do. They jump on food and they gobble it up. He wants that jerky. It's sort of, you just get it. And it's not that far from us because it's how we came. And I'm just watching him and I'm thinking, this is really hard to change the instinctive nature that we are and to remember that none of what we are dying to have, none of what we're willing to delude ourselves with, one more YouTube, one cookie, just think of it, it doesn't matter. They're silly examples, but they're not. That's how it starts. That's pondering a sense pleasure. Once you let it in, Krishna just shows, before you're there, before you think of it, not before you're there, before you think clearly, it's the annihilation of your spiritual path. This is what happens. We have to train ourselves to keep our eye like as if Master is right in front of us. Shanti, look at me. Look at me. Don't look anywhere else. What you want is not out there. Swamiji says it so beautifully. The happiness that we're looking for, that sense of completion in this life, will never come to us until we rest in that state of God consciousness, until we realize that life is a battle between pain and pleasure, those of pain and love. These were Master's words. And he says, never forget that even in the midst of pain, any pain, physical pain, emotional pain, fear, jealousy, greed, doesn't matter what it is, love continues because love is eternal. So if we can constantly tell ourselves, I'm going back to that state of love. Davy told a very interesting story. I think she told it at a Sunday service, so maybe some of you heard it, but she actually was telling me about it a long time ago. She had a very bad bronchitis, and she couldn't breathe. That's a really hard symptom to live with, when you can't get any breath. And she was laying in bed at night, and she felt herself starting to get anxious. And then she said to herself, what is real? What is real? And she just kept coming back to that. And she felt her breath start coming much more easily. That is, look at me. Look at me. And no matter what's going on over here, look at me. And when we train ourselves to do it longer and longer, I started with 3 seconds with Max, 3 seconds. And now we're up to 15. And soon, as soon as the bark comes, I can say, Max, look at me. He's not barking anymore. It's very different than saying, don't do that. That's hard. It's saying, do this. Come here. We have to ask ourselves, what is it, like with Judas, what is in us that draws us like that? What are our delusions? And it takes very much, like I hadn't even read the affirmation, but it turned out that it was perfect. I don't remember the lines now. But Swamiji wrote, look at yourself honestly. You can't work on anything otherwise. So he said it in this affirmation today. We have to find a way to resist that immediate gratification. There's a story that I've told here at least once before, but it's so perfect for this reading. I can't resist telling it again. And it's that study with the marshmallows that many of you know about, but for those of you who don't, anyway, it's enjoyable. This isn't a made-up story, it's true. They did a study with little children. They brought them into a room, one at a time, and they put them at a table. There's nothing else in the room, nothing in the whole room. And they put a marshmallow in front of them. And they say to them, here's a marshmallow for you. You can eat the marshmallow if you want it, but we're going to leave you alone for 15 minutes. That is a long time for a child. It's a long time for us. Think about when we started meditating for 15 minutes. And if you don't eat the marshmallow, we'll give you another marshmallow, and then you can eat them both. And they left the room, and these kids were being filmed. And it was a riot watching this. You can Google it and look it up. They would stare at this marshmallow. You know, one little boy does this. He just sits there like this, covering his eyes. Another kid goes and hides in the corner. He turns his back on the marshmallow. The most wonderful one is the little girl who bends over and she does like this. Just her tongue coming out of the corner of her mouth, licking the marshmallow. Another one starts touching it, playing with it, seeing what can I do. And one little boy, you see him, he gets so stern and he goes like this. 15 minutes, he stares at the marshmallow. You know, I'll tell you what happens at the end of the study. But that little boy who's like this, so much determination, so much will, commitment, they bring in the second marshmallow. They said, you did great. And they put the marshmallow down. And like that, in lightning speed, he grabs the marshmallows and stuffs them both in his mouth. But you know, they actually followed up with these little children, and they found out over years that those children who could control that immediate desire, who could wait for the prize, who could just see nothing but the prize in front of them, they were happier, they were more successful. I mean, they reported on their own lives. And it is just exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep our eye or keep coming back to it. We can't, this is why Yogananda says, at the first thought of delusion, the first thought, wipe it from your mind. Do something. Very much like training the puppy. Don't just say to yourself, I won't do it. There's no way that works. It doesn't, because it's in us. That's the problem. It's in us. That's why the story of Adam and Eve was so compelling for me. Oh, we actually have. We might have known that, but hearing Sri Yukteswar, because we know at some point these souls were rocks, minerals, crystals, bugs, butterflies, everything, right? We've come through all of that. But when you hear Sri Yukteswar say those souls were just put there, you think, wow, no wonder. It is so hard. It is hard, but it makes the prize all that much better. I want to read, I'm going to reread what is in the Gita reading today, because I want to read after it. Swamiji took the Gita reading, and he says here, implicit in this warning in the Gita, is a concomitant promise. And it's so utterly masterful what he did with it. But I think for us, hearing the first line of the Gita reading again and again is really what's important, because it says to us, once we do that, once we consider just one of whatever it is, or just one time, you know, it reminds me of, who was that? Saint Augustus, I think. Saint is the important word here, Augustus, who's praying to God. And he said, give me chastity and give me continence, but not yet. You know, and we know that. Let me sin one more time, and then give me chastity and continence. You know, we're all like this. So if we see it, self-honesty, then we can do something about it. So the Gita reading says, if one ponders on sense objects, that's the letting ourselves think about it for a while. Big mistake. Don't do it. There springs up attraction to whatever it is we're pondering. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger, Krishna says. From anger, there arises infatuation, which is the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. And we all know that place. We need that thing. We need that person. We need that dessert. We need that house. If we don't get that house, we all know this. I mean, you can fill in your blanks, but Krishna was really telling the truth. It all starts from pondering that sense object. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self, and from forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminatory faculty. And when discrimination is lost, Krishna says, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. Now that is frightening if you read that. It starts so simply, and then soon you don't know where you are. You don't know how you got there. And it starts in that one moment. This is where Yogananda says it, the first thought of delusion, that's the time to stop it. But what Swamiji wrote that is so beautiful, he says, again, this is the promise that he sees in that reading. For when a person concentrates on spiritual ideals, he feels himself increasingly attracted toward them. And we hear that over and over. If we focus on the satanic pool, we're drawn there. But if we can keep our minds, keep bringing it back to the spiritual ideals, then our attraction to them grows. That's how we raise ourselves up, expand ourselves spiritually. From this attraction grows the desire to live by them. The desire to live spiritually develops into intense yearning for God. Such divine yearning flames to impatience with anything that might prevent one from realizing Him. He's just showing us how we make a U-turn and we just do exactly the opposite. It's so simply laid out here. Of course, it's not always easy, but it is this simple. From this impatience with lesser realities arises total absorption in the consciousness of God. From such absorption ensues forgetfulness of the senses. And from sense forgetfulness arises indifference to worldly modes of thinking and behaving. Estrangement from worldly consciousness results in the complete annihilation of delusion. Isn't that beautiful? It's just masterful. He just turned it around. He's just saying, that's what happens most of the time. But look at what could happen. He uses the same words. It's so magnificent. And he teaches us how to go. Such is the ascending road, he says. And he says, don't let yourself be drawn in the other direction. He says, like water finding its way into deep wells. Well, we all know how that goes. You put water here and it just flows. No, we don't want to do that. We have to listen. I'll just close by telling you one more story. Again, thinking of how devotees fall. There's a person, a man who's been coming to me for quite some time now. I've seen him often with a serious spiritual issue. And we've been talking and meditating together, and it's hard. It's been very hard. And one day I said to him, you know, a group of us are getting together tomorrow to go outside and play. And I think if you just come with us for those hours, that's going to do more good to resolve this problem. Means lift it up by a spiritual thread, satsang, keeping company with higher beings, opening your heart. I said we laugh. Before we eat lunch, we chant, we meditate. It would be so great. And he said to me, I can't. I said, why not? He said, my children are here. I said, I thought your children are older. Oh yeah, but they're here now. I said, but isn't 125 and 120? Yeah, they are. I said, you know, they actually don't need you for those few hours. You really could come out with us and play. And he couldn't do it. I'm not telling stories on anybody else because I've shared right up here the story of when a very high being, man who's regarded as a saint in India, said to me once, if you do that, Shanti, that's what I was pondering on this particular sense, pleasure, people you don't even know will suffer for years. And I got mad at him and turned around and did it. So I'm not telling stories on anybody else. I'm saying to each of us, this is what a slippery slope it is. Read this reading that Swamiji said. Look at me. Just remember that. Look at me. And Krishna, I'll read one of the final, I'll end with this. So beautiful. One of the very last stanzas in the Gita, after the whole Gita, after he tells everybody, this is how you live, this is what you do with this, with that, with every issue that presents itself. And I really love the one after this, which I've already read up here, but I'm not going to do it. But this, he says, absorb yourself in me, be wholly devoted to me, worship and bow to me alone, so shall you undoubtedly reach me. And then he says, this I promise you faithfully, for you are dear to me. We have to remember that after Judas betrayed Jesus the way he did, not that long ago, in this century, Yogananda told us, Jesus appeared to Ramakrishna and he said, free him in this life. He didn't say, punish him more. It's only been 2,000 years. He needs to be punished more. Jesus, who was crucified after he was betrayed, said, free him. God loves us. He wants what's best for us. He's telling us, you are dear to me. As is always the case, we make the effort, and it's freedom at the end of the line for us. God bless you all.
Let's take a brief moment of silence.